Appropriate this year because we have the World Championships of Dead or Alive 6 being held at CEO. So anybody in this room take part in that tournament? Okay, you will learn nothing from this panel.
All right.
So thanks for attending anyway. But
thank you.
yes, thanks for being here. So how many people in the room, I assume, have played some Dead or Alive? Like any?
Pretty much, most everybody here,
Okay.
which is, kind of what we were hoping for.
Right. So the intention of this panel is really to sort of get you sort of into the idea of like, what is this game about? What's the deal of it? What's the history of it? And it's got a pretty interesting history to it.
Yeah, as we take a look at the crowd, we see that, maybe not all of you may have been necessarily alive from the beginning of Dead or Alive. Not necessarily the dead part, there's a pre-state.
Right.
So introductions are in order. For those of you who cannot read the
tiny
eye doctor font that we got our names on, go for it.
So I am Gerald Rathkolb. I have been playing Dead or Alive since Dead or Alive 2 in 1999 on the Dreamcast.
And I am Daryl Surratt, and I played Dead or Alive 1 in the arcades.
Nice.
Realized how quickly I lost my credits because of the damage, and I was like, man, never again. And then once it came out on Dreamcast, I was like, oh, the game's actually fun when DOA 2 came out.
Yep.
So we are collectively known as the... come on, we got a bigger logo than that. I got 3,000 by 3,000 resolution.
I think that got auto-sized. But yeah, we are part of the Anime World Order podcast, which is completely irrelevant to this panel.
Dead or Alive is anime.
I guess.
Spiritually. Maybe not an anime fighter because you can't like 8-way dash in midair.
No. But I would say, like, if you like what you hear in this panel, listen to our podcast, but that doesn't really apply here.
With the really small font for what the URL is, it's animeworldorder.com.
Yeah. So if you like, tendentially, if you like anime, we have a pretty good podcast. We've been around for 14 years, 13 years?
We are old enough to go to PG-13 movies.
Yes.
Without being carded.
So the idea behind Dead or Alive, history of Dead or Alive, 26 games of Dead or Alive have been created.
And one, I thought it said that I canceled one, like you went on social media and it was like, it's canceled.
I should have typed out one canceled one. 17 versions of the fighting game, the Xtreme Beach Volleyball game, an online gotcha game, and the mobile blackjack game.
Now, what is a gotcha game for people who aren't fully anime?
That is, basically like gambling.
Yeah.
It's basically gambling.
It's not surprise mechanics?
No, not surprise mechanics. The idea of if any of you play any free-to-play game, basically, and that has got
stuff like loot boxes, stuff like you buy pulls, and then we also got that live-action movie. We're talking all about that, right?
Which we don't talk about, but actually is kind of fun. So, even though my friend claims that it made his chicken pox worse after he watched it.
Oh, sweet.
So, Dead or Alive is the brainchild of effectively one guy.
Initially, anyway.
Initially, one guy. And that guy is Tomonobu Itagaki. And that is...
It's a rock star, John Romero kind of looking game developer dude.
Never likes to be photographed without his sunglasses. He took on this persona
of being like the bad boy, anti-establishment video game guy who's going to make a fighting game that is going to just smash everything apart.
Was not afraid to talk trash very, very openly. They asked him, what are your least favorite games? Like, what are your top 5 least favorite games?
And he's like Tekken,
and
Tekken.
Yep. And so he really hated Tekken, and he was like, I want to try something different from Tekken. But anyway...
Do you have anything about why the game's called Dead or Alive, or are we going to get to that?
Well, we can talk about that now.
Go for it.
So basically, Tecmo was in a pretty bad state when the original Dead or Alive game was coming out.
This was in 1995, 1996, thereabouts when the development was happening.
Oh, by the way, I do have one other picture here of
because he doesn't like to be photographed with the sunglasses on.
Yeah, this is how he looks with his sunglasses
on. That's how he looks with them off.
And we also have
some pictures of him before he got the long hippie hair.
Yeah. So actually, let's bring this up. Let's go straight to Dead or Alive 1. 1996, that's the PlayStation.
Was it 1996 when it came out on PlayStation?
That was
in the
PlayStation.
Arcade? Okay.
Yes, because it
was in the arcade first.
It was in the arcade first. And so it did get released on PlayStation. We have some footage. Let me see if I can bring this up. Of me playing this game horribly, because there we go.
Yeah, 1996 was the original date.
And so, like a lot of first-part 3D fighting games around this time, it was pretty jank. Like,
we're being generous when we say it's pretty jank. You're about to see.
So, this is
show of hands, who's never played this game? Okay, most everyone is familiar with the part one, at least.
Oh yeah.
What, bouncing breast option.
First game that I know of that actually had that option.
This may be the defining feature of Dead or Alive, but we'll get to that.
Well, this is the thing that every single review
talks about.
Yes, talks about. Well, Gerald, will you get to the game?
So there's tournament mode, but there's also Kumte.
And what's interesting is largely the cast of this stayed pretty consistent throughout the series.
Yeah, they just look a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah, the popularity vote basically just checks how many times a character's been checked against your memory card. But the game, the mechanics, yeah, the breasts were insane. Those women will hit themselves in the head with their breasts.
Well, you know.
But it's very, very, like, there are very few moves. The idea behind the series, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is that there is the punch, there is a grab, there is a block, and then there is a counter. And this game, the first version of it, had this counter, but it was pretty primitive. It was kind of easy to pull off, and so this was sort of the start of this series. Yeah, they would have these danger zone areas, so instead of having ring outs that would end the match, you would just have areas that you just took more damage and flew into the air, and then would just land later. And they still use that today. In fact, they still use that same mechanic of if they die on the danger zone, they'll just fly up into the air.
So this was made roughly in response to be sort of like a midpoint between like a Virtua Fighter and a Tekken. And at the time in 1996, I think Virtua Fighter was still on maybe part 3 or 2.
2 or 3?
Or 3, I forget. But Tekken was certainly...
Tekken was on part 2?
2.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
And so this came along, they called it Dead or Alive because basically the company's stakes were hinging on this game. It's like why the game's called Final Fantasy. It's because it would have been the last game that Square Enix put out if it didn't catch on.
But as unusual and as kind of jank as this game was, it was a success. The arcade version of it was a success. I didn't know they released the arcade version in America at all when you said you played it.
Yeah, it was in America.
But people liked it. I wonder why. And it kind of follows a similar trajectory, I think, to the original Street Fighter, in that the original Street Fighter game had those sort of elements of Street Fighter, but no one really plays that original game anymore.
Street Fighter 1, yeah.
Street Fighter 1. Like, I'm not talking about Street Fighter 2. So I don't think we need to watch my
I think you get the idea of part 1.
awful playing and trying to figure out this game again after I haven't played in years. But at this point, oops, let me find my mouse. So there was this point where I guess Tomonobu Itagaki saw some potential in this and put his team to work and came out with Dead or Alive 2, 1999.
That was a Japan release date, right?
Yes. No, we got it in 1999.
Did we get it in 1999?
I remember I graduated in 2000. That's how freaking old I am. And and I remember playing it in school. So I had not graduated yet.
So yeah, this is one of people who are nostalgic for Dreamcast. Like, this is one of the games that people liked a lot. But of course, the other game I like to frequently compare Dead or Alive against is not Tekken, but Soul Calibur. So right. Soul Calibur started off as Soul Edge and was similarly kind of janky, and then part 2 came along, and then people were like, oh wow, this is really something, and Dreamcast was like the place to play that on. So similarly, at first, like Dead or Alive, Soul Calibur had the reputation of being like the casual fan servicey game. The difference is that Dead or Alive still has that reputation, and Soul Calibur is one notch below.
Tiny notch, little sliver.
Just a little bit, but that's all they need to be dignified.
Let's actually hear what about the game from the developer.
The guy who made it.
Also, there we go.
Now this was before you could say crazy Japanese names.
So just so you know, this is an old video from, I believe it's G4 TV, if anybody remembers that channel. And
Yeah.
so some of the commentary
It's
is,
going to be a little dated. You may not be able to say these things
Yeah.
in public circles anymore.
but what is interesting here is Tomonobu Itagaki, at least at this time period.
Before,
From the producers of the Japanese PlayStation 2 game Dead or Alive 2 comes the all-new, all-American version DOA 2 Hardcore. It's got fearless fighters, great full control, and scads of incredible women. Hey, keep your pants on, fellas, because it's time to hear from the game director, Tommy Itagaki.
Tommy Itagaki,
Tommy
everybody.
Itagaki. Who is Tommy?
Let's see him.
Makes this fighting game so sweet.
で絵の美しさとか
There are three things that make a fighting game great. First of all, we focus on the motion of the game. Secondly, we work on the playability or control. And thirdly, we think about what will feel the best when we play. The visual and sound are secondary. It doesn't matter how good it looks or how good it sounds if you don't have those three things: motion, control, and the good feeling.
What about balance?
ってありますよね。で
What I mean by motion is that it is not just the attacks, but is the entire movement of the character, from standing position to fighting.
で実際動きますよね。そういったもの全部がモーション。
The stance of the character is quite important. No matter how good of an attack this particular character might have, if his stance does not look cool, you aren't getting the full benefit of the motion.
見てかっこよくなければもちろんその技のかっこよさも
Of course, the standing is one thing, but the attacks do need to look good. And when you get hit, you need to look like you're in pain. That relates to the good feeling that you get as a player.
So yeah, that was from the developer himself just before he decided to take
To
on
become
his,
a rock star.
the rock star persona.
Now, you can still play this game today, and I do recommend it because you see in that video clip, one of the big features of this game was tag mode. And that was something that people hadn't really seen too much. Like, I think Tekken Tag Tournament was maybe the only other thing where you could tag in and out. I mean, yeah, there was early Marvel.
Yeah, and the thing with Tekken Tag Tournament was that it was not combo conducive. So this was the game where you could tag people
out
and continue
mid-combo and continue the combo.
So let's check out some of the gameplay. For some of you, this
For some of you, this is probably bringing back some memories.
Now, this was probably the most advanced. There's me adjusting the volume because the game was really loud. But this was probably the most advanced fighting game on home consoles at the time. Also, now I love my story modes in my fighting games. I always play them. And I just follow the story mode here, and it makes no sense. I can't figure out what's going on.
That will be a recurring theme
Yes.
throughout the history of Dead or Alive.
Basically about like Doatek captured Kasumi at some point and then made a clone of her, and now Kasumi has to fight the clone. Yeah, I like Tina a lot, so I tended to play her. Yeah, this is me again. Like,
But yeah, like this is the one that introduced like stage transitions.
yes, a lot of stage transitions, which we
Just
had
to say, if you hit
before.
someone, in a certain area, it would transition to another map entirely, which was like, I think the first time I ever saw that was like Mortal Kombat 3,
Yeah,
which is a terrible game. by the
yeah,
way.
not great, but this one made that part of the strategy. Let me see if I can move it on a bit. I captured 20 minutes of terrible game footage. Oh yeah, and then they would have these danger zones. I love how this.
Man, seeing this footage makes me feel like I'm 100 years old, or more specifically, like I set my age to 99 in the options menu.
Oh yeah, this is part of the emulation. Yeah, a lot of the characters were basically more refined from their Dead or Alive 1 parts. Zack there, you would see, a lot of them were designed after celebrities or inspired by celebrities. Zack was, if any of you guys remember, Dennis Rodman. He was very. Oh yeah, here is the tag tournament, the tag mode. As you can see, Tekken Tag was out at this time, but yeah, you couldn't do that in Tekken Tag. And so.
And the
yeah,
other thing I
danger
didn't like
zones-
about Tekken Tag is that once you KO'd one person,
Yeah, that was the end of the round.
that's the round.
Yeah, I didn't like that at all. That pissed me off so much. But yes, you can still play this game today. because there is DOA 2 Hardcore.
Which is basically, they improved the game from the Dreamcast version for the PS2 release.
Yes.
And so this is on PlayStation Network as a PS2 classic,
Yep.
$10.
$10.
But
it's still very playable.
Well,
in
here's
my
the thing
opinion.
though. PS2 classic can't play on a PS4.
No, it has to be played on PS3.
Yeah, which
So
is crazy to me. But what do I know?
maybe PS5 will fix that, but we'll see.
I doubt it.
But yes, so this game is still very playable, in my opinion. You can go back, you can play Dead or Alive 6 and Dead or Alive 2, and you can see where it sort of evolved from, but it's not like playing Dead or Alive 1, which is kind of barely playable, in my opinion.
So this next one is a bit of an interesting one because after that point, they decided, okay, we're going to be like one of the only Japanese companies that's going to release games exclusive for Xbox.
Yes.
The original Xbox, which I used to call the Xbox One, but now there's a console called the Xbox One.
Right. So this is when they released Ed or Alive 3. So
Ed? No, it's just E.
Ed.
Yeah,
No, Dead or Alive 3.
Got to center that text.
Yes. And so, oops, let's pull up some footage of this.
Yeah, so they made some changes to the system, and for my money's worth, I don't know how much I like these changes from DOA 2 to DOA 3. This one is...
Again, the graphics in this were pretty incredible for its day.
Just recycle some of those Ninja Gaiden art assets, maybe.
Ninja Gaiden wasn't out yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was before Ninja Gaiden. So, and I wonder if this is where they were licensing the music.
Well, yeah, even since part 2, they had licensed Aerosmith songs, which may be...
I don't think part 2 did. I thought it was part 3 that had the Aerosmith. But I know that Tomonobu Itagaki...
He liked Aerosmith
He likes Aerosmith a lot, so he licensed a lot of their music, but you don't get those licenses forever.
And that is probably a big reason why, even though the Xbox One is backwards compatible with 360 and original Xbox games, you don't see the DOA 3 as a backwards compatible title because a lot of it might just be they don't want to pay that music license.
So notice some of the levels here, and now it's a lot more sophistication. They're fighting on sand. There's Bass with his really upset that his daughter dare, socialize. Tina's his daughter.
So yeah, Bass is obviously based on Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Brad Wong here was
Yeah, this is the introduction. This is where he first was introduced, but he wasn't in 2, was
Yeah,
he?
this was his first introduction, yeah.
So yeah, they figured Tekken
Some of
as a
these-
drunken master, Virtua Fighter as a drunken master, it's time for DOA to get one.
And these transitions were brutal, this one here especially. And he's still alive, so.
Just a scene transition, you take nominal damage. But one of the things that people often criticize the early Dead or Alive games for, they said these games, like part of the reason why it has the reputation for being like the casuals game, is that the counter system was considered just too easy to do. You just needed to turtle. Just hold back, and if they try to strike, that's your opportunity there, counter.
So what they did in this one was they actually simplified the counter system a bit. Now we'll get to the details of the counter system, but they made it a little bit too easy to counter in this one, and some of the mechanics in this never translated to any other Dead or Alive.
Yeah, they realized.
It was not a good idea. Also, yeah, I love some of the graphics in this. Even today, I think some of the level design.
Show them the thing that I like least about Dead or Alive 3. Let's see that boss fight.
Dead or Alive 3 is one of the worst final boss fights I've ever seen in a fighting game. And as you all know, final boss fights in fighting games are always bad.
Right. I mean, you thought Omega Rugal was annoying.
So,
how can we make it more annoying than an SNK final boss?
and this final boss never showed up at any other time. Was seemingly unrelated to anything story-wise. See how they change how the layout of the screen. Now your camera's behind the main character.
And now it makes it very difficult to judge the distance.
Every time this guy's largely like a projectile character.
In a game that does not generally have projectile.
There's no projectiles, and he's the only one who has projectiles. So this was kind of a mess of a final boss.
Yeah, it's like between the fire effects in the background and the foreground.
And you can't throw him. So
That's right, he's
another-
throw immune
Yeah.
in a game that is basically rock, paper, scissors.
There's certain characters who largely their moveset are a lot of throws. So there were just certain characters who this boss was basically impossible to play against. However, they did something kind of weird with this, and I'm going to play. This was the time when they would have a lot of ridiculous endings for the characters, and I'm going to play one ending for a certain reason. This is a character in this show called a game called Zack.
So again, Zack is
the self-taught Muay Thai. I have to say that because Muay Thai is really, really bad and ridiculous. His look is designed after Dennis Rodman, even though he's a goofy guy. But the reason I'm showing this is that Dead or Alive would go in an interesting direction because of this ending. So technically, this is the canon ending to Dead or Alive.
like canonically, Zack won the tournament, so that this ending could be the one true ending.
I love these ridiculous
But yeah, well,
endings.
I'm always a fan of ridiculous endings. And yeah, you see, Japanese people, they know, like, who's a black person? Dennis Rodman, Michael Jackson. Got it.
Bob Sapp.
This
Yes,
was before Bob
Sapp.
Sapp.
Before Bob Sapp, yeah. And so that ending, strangely enough, that considered the canonical ending. Let's go through the slides again, because I lost my place.
Let's do these.
Introduced Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, which was really weird because this was Tomonobu Itagaki basically said, I'm making this as kind of a gift for the fans. And because
Fan service, if you will.
yeah, and because we're a bunch of stupid guys, we look at these covers and we're like, haha, this is clearly made for us.
Wrong.
Wrong. These game series brought in a huge number of female fans to the Dead or Alive series.
Which
Fans who
still
had never
exists to this day.
Yeah, never played the original fighting games, and may not even be fans of them today still, but they are super into Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball.
And the reason is a couple of things, because in addition to the volleyball aspect, there were other parts of the games that were effectively, getting like crazy outfits, giving gifts to people, and then having them be catty, and then they give you a gift back, and you open the gift, and it's the gift that you just gave them because they don't like it, and they're being real passive aggressive.
I was telling a friend about this who was super into Extreme Beach Volleyball, and she was really upset that she couldn't come up here and be on the panel to talk about how much she loves Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball. So this series is huge with a lot of female fans, and I think that's great. And interestingly enough, we got part 1 and we got part 2. We did not get part 3, but there was...
Well, one thing to note is that it was only part 1 that was called Extreme Beach Volleyball, because there were other game modes that you could play that they said, oh, well, we don't want to just make people think that it's a volleyball game, so they just called it Dead or Alive Extreme, which is kind of a weird thing to call it because it makes you think it's one of the fighting games.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so...
it's basically, a lot of
This
cheesesteaky
ridiculous-
fan servicey type stuff.
Well,
but
not in this video.
Not in this video, yeah. See, there was this movie a long, long time ago called Titanic that made a bunch of money.
That is my island.
By the way, that horrible voice acting is Dennis Rodman.
They actually got Dennis Rodman.
And he cannot, if you've
Can't
ever
act.
seen Double Trouble, which
You ever
nobody
seen
has,
Simon Says?
he is a terrible, terrible actor. And he's totally wrong for this part because even though he's designed physically after Dennis Rodman's not like this goofy guy. But yeah, the idea was that the Zack ending was the canonical ending to it. And so, yeah, there we go. That's the rest of that ending.
Right, so he bought, an island with his gambling winnings and then invited all the ladies over so they could play volleyball.
Well, he invited them over because it was supposed to be Dead or Alive 4. Didn't happen. And so they were like, screw you, Zach, we're just going to play volleyball now. So this is ridiculous and still around today. But yeah, part 3 didn't come out in America, but there was an English language Asian edition, and part 3 sold super well. So well, in fact, they released a second edition, like a couple of weeks ago for the Switch. And these games are incredibly low effort and incredibly high return.
So it's, everything that video game publishers want to see.
Right. And so,
So yeah, the first two of those games, they didn't sell super well, but then this third one made a ton of money, and now you've got this now that just came out. As you can see, it's on Steam.
This is weird. This is Dead or Alive Venus Vacation, the gacha game, which is
effectively a mobile game that they ported over to PC.
Yeah, this is some footage behind this. This is this guy's 837th uploaded video of Dead or Alive Venus Vacation. So I tried to play this and it was just sitting at menus while I tried to look up the translation guide. But it's like every single gacha game you've ever seen.
Same stuff, you pay for, pulls and you get random junk items.
Basically what this is,
that you want.
Basically this is a military strategy game where your fighters are volleyball players and their weapons are swimsuits. And depending on their, the swimsuits, it gives them different abilities. But again, this game, super popular. It's got this weirdly large American audience as well. Yeah, this guy is a maniac. Look how fast this guy is moving. Or lady. And you don't even play volleyball in this.
No.
You actually just set them up.
This is the actual gameplay. This is not the configuration part.
Let me see it. There we go. You can speed through the volleyball game. But yeah, this is huge now, and still going on, and they still come out with the swimsuits. I wonder if I can find.
So this is free to play, right?
This is free to play, which means the secret to that is pay to have fun.
Pay to enjoy yourself.
By the way, the thing on the left there, that's the new swimsuit, which seems like a really great idea.
That's a
as long as you don't
as
get
long
wet.
as you don't get any water on it whatsoever,
Yes.
all that strategically adhered sand. I'm just saying. So there is
if you're
some
interested in this, there are a lot of guides out there for this. Now, how to register, download, and play. But this was sort of where there was that split
sort of break. The fighting game side of DOA, and then the side that makes us all the big money.
Right. And so this is not to say that we didn't get more fighting games, because we got Dead or Alive 4. This would be the last game directed by Tomonobu Itagaki.
It was also 360 exclusive, right? There was no PS3.
360 exclusive. It's weird because all of the Xbox era games are the hardest to play now. Again, as you were saying before, this game is not available in backwards compatibility. Let's actually bring it up, the intro for this. Again, tremendous looking graphics.
Definitely not the Tekken Force, because Tomonobu Itagaki hates Tekken so much that he just happens to accidentally keep putting elements that are awfully similar to Tekken in his own game.
Now, maybe this song sounds familiar
Yes,
to you
from
guys.
Revolution X right now.
But this is an Aerosmith song, which may be the reason why we don't have this game in backwards compatibility, because they may not have the license for this song anymore.
I also don't feel like patching it out, because that would take developmental effort.
But they went back to the old style of the counters, which made them a little bit more difficult, and a little bit more risky to pull off.
Was this where they introduced having to hold forward to counter mid?
Yes, no, they had that in part 2.
It was in part 2, and they took it out for part 3, and that's why it was just holding back the whole time in part 3.
Yeah.
With no real counterplay to it.
And again, I love the, this one had some of the neatest levels. I just love that people can survive these things.
Well, ninja, it happens.
Yeah.
I see Naruto, it happens all the time. I guess, Naruto's a dated reference, you gotta say Boruto now.
Boruto?
All the people watching Boruto weren't alive when Naruto was on.
You mean Boruto's dad?
Boruto's dad is the new director.
And as you can see, they were really showing off, at the time, the power of the 360 with that clothing was a
right,
really
to have
difficult
cloth move like that was very difficult once upon a time. To have hair move like that was very difficult once upon a time.
And
so they're showing off.
This is interesting as well, because in this intro, you'll see kind of when this game was released in relation to the 360. Because it's one of my favorite levels ever. Not this one. This is not bad, but yeah, this is. By the way, that character,
This character here with the mask
that
was
character there with the
introduced.
mask was introduced in Xtreme Beach Volleyball
Right.
as Lisa.
And she's actually my favorite character, and she's
I love
naturally
Lisa.
she's one of Japan's least favorite characters.
Unfortunately.
They also don't like Tina very much.
No.
They are also wrong.
Yes, they are.
These are the best characters in the game.
I love Lisa and Tina. These are my favorites.
But yeah, I mean, it was not like like nowadays it's super common to have lucha libre in your as a fighting game character style. Like, you know, almost every game has one now at this point. But back then, not so much.
But yeah, this was really, really difficult to do. It doesn't seem like anything today, but that the cloth didn't like clip through her leg and such. I have more important than gameplay. I have that cutscene, but.
Well, yeah, and once again, this is when I think like the story mode started to be like, let's just make the whole story mode like how we have those ending cinematics.
Yeah, this is the last boss, super, super cheap.
The Alpha 152.
Yep, Alpha 152, which was yet another clone of Kasumi. Like this story got really, yeah, this level here.
Yeah, this is one of the best
And
maps,
notice that.
so they actually brought it back for part 6.
Yeah, notice what it says here. You know, congratulations on the launch of the 360. Yeah, I love this level so much. Bam.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of backgrounds that have a lot of stuff going on, whether it's SNK games or early Capcom.
Yeah, it gives them a lot of character.
But yeah, you can see like, you know, mechanically, it's one of those sort of games like Soul Calibur where even if you don't know what you're doing, you can just press buttons and get something that at least looks kind of cool.
Right.
And so
Well, they were always about having fun first. Not that the mechanics, I don't think, are deep enough to be enjoyable.
But yeah, I mean, as part of why, like, let's say if you come to an event like this or, you know, video game convention, you know, you don't typically have been seeing DOA tournaments that's starting to change, you know, as of now, because obviously we're here at CEO, there is a DOA tournament. And that's part of because of what, you know, as we saw in the video with Itagaki, what he was focusing on at the time from then, and it starts to change after this one.
Yeah, and I think this was where Tomonobu Itagaki lost his mind a little bit.
A little bit?
Little bit. Because then they would have some of my favorite cutscenes ever in video games, like this one here.
Yeah. This should just be called Dead or Alive.mp4. Oh yeah, they're dinosaurs now.
Yep, dinosaurs.
Because Tekken had them.
Hey, Tomei. Oh no, what's gonna happen?
How many other fighting games can you jump kick a dinosaur? And then uppercut a dinosaur? And now she's mad that he knocked out the dinosaur who was going to kill her, and then they fight.
Then they fight. That is my favorite transition to a fighting scene, to a fighting game.
NetherRealm Studios has got nothing on that one.
Nope, loved it so much. So yeah, that was Dead or Alive 4. Last game directed by Tomonobu Itagaki. At this time, he had a couple of conflicts with the studio and left. Started his own studio, Valhalla Studios.
And to date, they've made basically nothing.
They made one game.
I'm
on the
saying
Wii.
nothing that was like real.
And he's also stepped down. He's now like a consultant or something. So we'll see.
Yeah, maybe not the best manager.
Maybe not. He was known for being kind of like really, really a perfectionist because the games are you know, like done like that. But yeah, it was handed off to another guy, Yohei Shimbori, and then we have Dead or Alive 5 on PlayStation 3. Yeah, Dead or Alive directed by Yohei Shimbori, who is now the main sort of face of Dead or Alive today.
And this was when they had a major shift, in my opinion, on the Dead or Alive series prior to this, and then the Dead or Alive series since. Part of it is because of the change in director, but the other part of it, I think, is just because the way that they decided to, I guess, release this thing. Because nowadays, if Dead or Alive has a reputation, aside from, that's the casual fan servicey game, which, okay, so is Soul Calibur. But this one is the one that is
So is Street Fighter.
expensive. Yeah, have you seen some of those Street Fighter DLC outfits? I'm saying, I bought them all. But no, like the DLC started to get ridiculous in DOA 5.
I have a screenshot of
Give me
that
the
later.
screenshot. Let's see. Okay.
Hold on, I need to...
And then they also said we're going to make it go free to play and charge even more for it. So DOA 5 got
where is
re-released
that?
a couple of times. There was DOA 5 Ultimate, then DOA 5 Last Round. It got ported over to PlayStation 4. Then they released it on the PC, and everyone thought they would be getting like the latest version. No, you got the PS3 version.
I swear I made a
Same
slide of it
engine.
and I don't see it there now.
So it's
sorry,
like when
but-
they had new stages or new like outfits that use like the new features, you don't get them on PC.
Yeah,
We'll charge you
there
the
was-
same amount of money, but you don't get it on PC.
Yeah, if you wanted to get all the DLC for this game, it would cost you $1,200 plus.
Yeah, $1,289 if you were to buy it in the free-to-play piecemeal. But you could also save.
No,
a
that
bunch-
was if you bought the $60 game.
Okay, if you buy the $60 game, it
Hold
costs that
on,
much.
because at this point they introduced the concept of Dead or Alive Core Fighters, which was, I wouldn't say a free-to-play version, but it was like a stripped-down basic version of the game. So you get it for free, you get 4 fighters, you get a couple of levels, and you can try the game out. It's a little, like somewhere in between like the full game and a demo. So you get the real experience, and that has proved to be very, very profitable for them, because then you can add what you want to the game. In my opinion, if you're not sure about Dead or Alive, download Core Fighters. If you like it, then buy the full game.
Yeah, do not buy piecemeal parts of Core Fighters.
No.
You will not have a good time there. But one of the things they also did for DOA 5 that they did not have in the previous games was introduce guest characters, which is now all the rage. Everyone's super hyped about the guest characters in Soul Calibur, the guest characters in Tekken, and DOA 5 had some guest characters as well. Like they added Mai.
Yeah, Mai Shiranui. They had a crossover with King of Fighters and Virtua Fighter, which was interesting. They also added new characters to this. Like this is a character. I love this guy. This guy is named Rig because he lives
He
on a
works on
rig.
an oil rig, so
And
he's
he
got
calls himself
amnesia,
Rig.
so they just named him Rig.
And the guy on the right there is an actor named Wentworth Miller, who was in a show called Prison Break that was very popular in Japan around the time this game was being designed.
Yeah, the Flash wasn't out yet just yet.
Yeah, so I want to believe, like these guys were watching Prison Break and were like, let's take this guy, add about 100 pounds of muscle to him, and then we've got Rick. And that's not uncommon. I mean, every single fighting game has got their Bruce Lee, so pretty common. They also introduced one of my favorite fighters. This is Mila.
So yeah, MMA,
MMA.
was finally starting to get like globally popular, and so they said we can introduce more MMA fighters, and also because Tekken had one.
Also, this is where they were trying a little bit to be taken a little bit more seriously. So they had this this campaign called the I'm a Fighter campaign. So they would have various posters of this, and they would have the I'm a Fighter thing. And I liked the campaign. But yeah, Mila's great. The roster for this, here's the roster. This is the largest roster to date for any Dead or Alive game.
36 characters?
I haven't counted it.
I believe it's 36.
But yeah, as you see at the bottom here, yeah, this is where they introduced characters like Tengu and Marie Rose, Momiji. These characters here, like this was these 4 characters here were from Virtua Fighter, which is interesting because Virtua Fighter is such a technical game. So I was surprised that they were able to translate the characters at all to Dead or Alive, but they did.
There's also Rachel from Ninja Gaiden over there.
Yep, Rachel from Ninja Gaiden. We haven't talked about the Ninja Gaiden games, which makes me wonder, is Dead or Alive a spin-off of Ninja Gaiden? Because
Well, I
Ryu
would think so.
Hayabusa is in
The
Dead or
original
Alive.
NES era Ninja Gaiden games had Ryu Hayabusa, and then when the first Dead or Alive game came out, he was in that game. He's been in every single DOA ever since.
And then they had the Ninja Gaiden games that they came out with, which were excellent, like, action games, and a lot of the Dead or Alive characters were in that, and then some of the characters in those Ninja Gaiden games ended up in Dead or Alive.
Right, because there are a lot of ninja in Dead or Alive anyway, so you can just put Ayane in there.
Yeah, Tomonobu Itagaki really likes ninjas, and I can get behind that. This also introduced the idea of sort of the power blow. That's a really
a
dark,
really dark screenshot we got
Yeah,
there.
I've got some game footage of this if it loaded.
But verbally, just basically, if
Basically-
you have very low health, much like how King of Fighters and certain other games had desperation mechanics, you could use the power blow once you were in the red.
Yeah, by the way, this is me capturing some footage there. By the way, I did not choose Tina's
I
outfit.
think you chose that outfit.
That just was a random selection.
Random.
I'm playing Genfu.
Pure coincidence.
So you'll see here, as this fight goes on, the life bars are now blinking red.
Right, so basically, once you're able, now you're
There we
able
go.
to do a power blow, which
There's
is
power
this
blow.
effect here.
And power blow can have some interesting effects. There we go. So you notice that this giant Buddha here is now flashing. The levels were so cool.
Yeah, and that is a recycled Ninja Gaiden 2 stage, because
Yeah.
that's the first boss you fight in Ninja Gaiden 2.
And they recycled this stage again for some DLC for Attack on Titan. Can you imagine how they used it there?
Yeah, they just replaced the Buddha statue with the Colossal Titan.
Yes. But there were other versions of this game as well. This was where the series, and I love Dead or Alive a lot. But it was at this point where there was this sort of separation between the people that make the game and then the sort of the business heads at Tecmo. So they released Dead or Alive Ultimate, and then they released Dead or Alive Last Round. Then we talked about Core Fighters. Dead or Alive Ultimate is where they added people like Rachel Momiji, Jackie Bryan from Virtua Fighter. Then they added one of my other favorite characters. Oh yeah, Dead or Alive Last Round basically was exactly the same, except they added a character named Honoka, who was effectively one of those fighting game characters that didn't have any of her own moves, but just had moves from everybody else. And they added one of my favorite characters, Nyotengu.
So basically, she was like a playable, more balanced version of the first boss, Tengu.
Yes, the boss from the second
Second game, I'm sorry.
whose name is actually Gohakumine Bankatsubo.
Nailed it.
Yes, perfect.
Take the JLPT.
Here we go. I guess they found that somehow an old fat Tengu with a long nose is less marketable than a sexy lady who with wings who has effectively the same moves. So now we get up to the modern age, and we have Dead or Alive 6,
which is obviously the latest version of the game that just came out. We've got the tournament here. Top 24 is probably tomorrow. Yeah, then they're going on to top 8 and they're going to finish it out.
Possibly one of the best looking fighting games I've ever seen in my life.
But not without some controversy, because remember, imagine you're a lifelong Dead or Alive fan and you bought all those season passes for DOA 5.
Which I did.
Which, they're on like season 13 or whatever, and each one of those
and those Dead or Alive season passes were like
$100.
They were expensive.
And then DOA 6 comes out and none of your DLC carries over. And then they have way fewer characters. Now there's no tag mode yet. It may still be coming in a future version.
Yeah, this engine is...
it is a very nice version.
Yeah, it's so demanding that they couldn't actually get the memory to be able to switch out characters fast enough for tag mode. So
maybe when PS5 hits, you'll see an updated version of DOA 6. But yeah, they're still working on this game. They've just announced that there's going to be 2 new characters, which are basically, again, another King of Fighters crossover.
Well, they're out there.
They're out now.
It's Kula Diamond, and Mai Shiranui is back.
She's a lot worse now, though.
And we were originally going to hook up our PS4 and demonstrate some of the basics.
It was not working.
It was not working, so I made this this other video in the hopes. Yeah, very Dead or Alive basics.
Yeah, I wonder what this video is about.
I wonder.
Okay, so yeah, we've been talking, making jokes about rock, paper, scissors and stuff like that, but for those who don't know...
Basic punch, basic kick, basic throw.
And so throws cannot be blocked.
Counters, the various counters, we're going to get to those.
If you try to strike, you
Here's the new concept of Fatal Rush.
This is new to DOA 6.
So this was basically a combo that was
a free combo button.
Yeah.
The break low is similar to the power move, only you can do it based on now you have a secondary resource meter up at the top.
Yeah, you can do this at any time as long as you've got the bar full, and it has pretty high priority. It's not unblockable and not uncounterable, but if you throw it, you're more than likely to get it landed. And the break hold,
is
which
basically like your get out of jail free counter.
Yes.
Effectively.
So basically, this is a sort of a reset. I wouldn't say it's a counter. It's more.
Well,
of a
I'm saying like if you use your break hold, regardless of whether they're doing a high, medium, or low.
Yes. You don't have to be very specific with this as long as they are attacking you and you've got enough of your bar there.
Yeah, it costs half the bar.
Boom.
And yeah,
Now you can reset.
It's a reset.
So very useful. It's got me out of a lot of bad situations. And boom, you can counter.
Now, one thing I will say, like, I don't know if anyone is current, like, we did get some show of hands of people who were in the tournament earlier, but they are changing the balance of this game, like, as we speak, and they did just release, like, kind of I would say kind of a slightly controversial balance patch because it's a 3D fighting game, and so as a 3D fighter, you have, an expectation that you move not just in one plane, but you can also sidestep. Sidestepping is now severely reduced in effectiveness as of the latest patch.
Yeah, this game introduced, I was going to put sidestepping in here, but it was, first of all, I didn't have anyone to really work with, but second, the sidestepping is, as Daryl was saying, was so good.
In the previous games, it was so good, and even in the initial release of DOA 6,
effectively like if you knew how to sidestep very well, you were impossible.
Right.
Like you couldn't, and so they have
they've drastically reduced the viability of sidestepping as of at the time we're doing this presentation anyway, such that it's practically a 2.5D fighter.
Yes. And so the counters, this is the bread and butter of Dead or Alive.
Yeah, I would say this is like a feature that makes Dead or Alive stand out, the fact that everybody can be predictable.
And the idea, of course, is that this is your high-risk, high-reward move. So,
if your opponent strikes, you have the option to counter, and you basically just have to predict whether it is high, medium, or low, and then now they've also added whether it's a punch or a kick, I believe.
Well, the punch or the kick is the same for a high or low.
Okay, but not for mid.
The mid, this is the low counter here.
And so you at least have to predict that they're going to throw this particular thing to counter like that specific way. It's not as difficult as, say, a Tekken throw reversal, where you have to know the throw that they're doing.
If you can do that, you can possibly follow up then, like that. Then mid-counter punch. The idea was this, is that you counter back with a mid-counter punch.
Right, but you do the standard counter input is you hold back and hit counter, and if they throw that strike, you'll counter them. But if they're going to kick, you have to actually hold forward instead of backwards.
Right, so you have to be able to
know they're at least going to try to kick.
Sort of what they're going to do. It's a big gamble.
Yeah, no, I don't know if they're able to get the video of this, but let's say you throw out a counter and they don't strike.
This is why it's a huge risk. So if Daryl is fighting me and he throws out a counter and I say fake him out, I can grab him and throw him, and that does about 30% more damage. So
that is basically the interplay you have in Dead or Alive. And so yeah, it's a casual, sort of fighting mechanic. But even now in, say, Street Fighter V, you've got a similar rock, paper, scissors setup in the way that strikes beat throws. And
what I love about Dead or Alive is that it is a really good, psychological game, because the idea is to, psych out your opponent and make them think you're going to do something. They counter, and then you counter them with a throw.
Sure, and certainly that aspect exists in every fighting game, but as far as a good entry level to the concept of it, because, let's face it, dive kick is fun for about 15-20 minutes, but then, you maybe want a little more in your life. This is sort of a good next step.
Yeah, there's Dead or Alive core fighters.
And, yeah, we can actually bring up the thing from the instruction manual we're talking about. Yeah,
there we go. So that the idea is the triangle system.
Yeah, they didn't want to say the Japanese, they actually literally do call it the John Ken system, which is what they call rock, paper, scissors. So it's not like a pejorative to say, oh, it's rock, paper, scissors. But yeah, strikes beat throws, throw beat holds, and holds beat strikes.
Right. And here's a look at the roster. This is, I took this a little bit ago because some of the newer Mai and Kula are not in it.
And as you can see, there's still space to add some additional characters even after that.
Right, they're going to be adding a lot more. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the characters themselves. And there is no easy way to sort of divide up the characters necessarily, so I kind of had to come up with a method of our own, and there's gray areas between this as well, but for those of you who kind of want a good place to start, we thought that this was kind of a good way to think about the characters. So you have the ninjas, and largely because they all have a similar sort of way of fighting. A lot of these guys and girls are very fast. Like Hayate there is probably the slowest fast character, and Ayane there is probably the fastest fast character there. In my opinion, if you are new to the game, I think Kasumi is a good place to start and a good balance of a slow and a fast, like the slow and the fast.
Right, like in all fighting games, you want to pick like the basic boring character, aka Ryu, and learn like, you know, that character just so you know the basic fundamentals of it, because then every other character is sort of developed in response to that baseline.
I thought what you're supposed to do is pick Ryu and never play anything else because Ryu is so
just
good at
so
everything.
Great. No, now it's Akuma and...
And then there's the wrestler characters. These guys, you have a lot more throws available to them, and as you can see, that's Bass, Tina, and Lisa. Bass is probably the largest, like slowest character in the entire game, and probably the most powerful.
Yeah, certainly, like, you know, most fighting games have a character like this. I usually don't recommend picking them as the very first character you use to learn it, just because you're usually dependent on knowing what it is the other people are trying to do so that you can get in and then get your one big slam.
Right, I love
like, don't learn Guilty Gear and pick Potemkin as your first character, please.
Yeah, I love all these are all three of my favorite characters, but if this is your style of play, I think Tina is probably the best place to start. If you like this style. A lot more
obviously,
throws.
you know, Lisa is a lot more mobile.
Yes, she is the luchador style. She's a lot more flying, a lot more jumping. Bass can barely get off the ground. So, you know, his stuff, you know, is much slower. Very, very hard to deal with Bass against people who are very fast, which brings us to, again, this is difficult to divide these characters up, but this is the best I could figure out was fast strikers. So we have Kokoro, Lei Fang, Zack, Christy, and Helena, and various degrees of how fast and how strong these characters are.
Like Christy in particular would have like, you know, you get like a lot of like punch strike combos.
Yes,
and
Christy and Zack are actually very similar.
Zack's similar with kicks.
Yes, a lot of very fast, long combos, things like that.
Now, of these, who do you think would be like the best like start here if you want to learn this style? Like,
I think Zack is probably the easiest to start with because a lot of these characters like Lei Fang and Helena
Helena's really difficult, I would say.
They've got like different poses to get into that you know perform other moves from, and so I think Zack is a lot more straightforward and a good place to start here. Christy is a little bit trickier as well, and I like Zack. He's a goofball. Then you have kind of the guys who I would categorize as sort of strong strikers, like maybe a bit slower, maybe not as many moves, but if you can get them in, then they do a lot of damage.
Right, I would say, you know, Hitomi is sort of a character who was added to be an accessible beginner's character. In fact, when you play the tutorial, which I highly recommend because the tutorial in both DOA 5 and DOA 6 is quite extensive, they usually assign you to be Hitomi because you can pick up on it pretty quickly. John Lee is also another good starting character.
Diego there is one of the new characters. He's one of my favorites. His style is street fighting.
Style is Travis Touchdown lost his lightsaber.
Yes, basically. And Brad Wong, I love him, but yeah, he's drunken style, so again, the drunken style characters are never ones to start with. They're a little bit too tricky. I think Hitomi is a good starting place here, and she can, like, you can go all the way with her, but I think that she's easier to learn.
Right, Genfu so far is not in the game because in previous, like when they'd run tournaments with Genfu previously, people would usually tear up with him.
Genfu was, if you watch tournaments from like Dead or Alive 4 and 5, everybody is using Genfu and they're just murdering each other.
And so Elliot is sort of the character who's created to be like a slightly less OP Genfu.
I think that they maybe found it easier to market a handsome young man rather than an old, graying guy.
With a big, bushy mustache.
Yes. And then,
but that's starting to come back into fashion soon, so maybe Genfu and Speedo.
Then you have grapplers, which are kind of a mix between like the strong strikers and the wrestlers. Characters like, you know, Bayman and Rig, who have a lot of various throws. Mila, of course, is MMA. Marie Rose there is a weird one as well. Like, she has a lot of grappling moves, but she also has a lot of weird moves where she like throws her butt at you. Yeah, Marie Rose is she uses a martial art called Sistema. I don't know much about it, but of these characters, I don't think any of these characters are very easy to deal with.
Yeah, like you may need to learn combo throws, you may need to learn, like, in the case of Milo, like how to mount and then, you know, do various other like things that follow up after that.
Yeah, so I wouldn't start with any of these characters if you're new to it. If you, again, but if this is your style, maybe Bayman is a bit easier to get into. And then there are the characters who don't really...
So miscellaneous.
Yeah, the other characters, because it was around Dead or Alive 5 where they were adding... Dead or Alive, while it was never like hyper-realistic, it was never like Virtua Fighter. Generally, people weren't doing like mystical stuff too much, but now they've added a lot of these characters that can kind of do anything. Like, I mean, we have Nyo Tengu who can fly, and her martial art is Tengu Fu. And as you can see, Kula Diamond, who throws a lot, who like freezes you, and Honoka, which she doesn't really categorize as anything because she has kind of everything. Like she has fighting moves from Bass and from Jan Li, and all over the place. So each one of these guys are kind of an island of their own. I love Nico there. She's one of the new characters from Dead or Alive 6. Did anybody here see a movie called The Raid?
So Nico's fighting style, she's supposed to be using the same fighting style as the main characters in The Raid. She's supposed to be a practitioner of Pankok Silat, but I don't remember at any point in The Raid when they fired lightning from their hands.
Yes, she does a lot of like lightning, and she's Finnish. Nico, very Finnish.
Very well known, you know, Indonesian
yes.
martial arts style, all the rage in Finland.
And then we have the Sirs and Mams not yet appearing in this game.
We don't yet have Samus from Metroid in this one.
Yeah, Samus was in Dead or Alive Dimensions.
Yeah, she was in a Dead or Alive game, Samus. That is not the Master Chief from Halo because, listen, Bungie has standards about the lore of the Master Chief, and they would not permit the Master Chief to be in a Dead or Alive game, so they just made a female Spartan with a random number on it.
Then you see characters here like, see if the mouse will appear. Yeah, Genfu, who was replaced with Elliot. This character is a bit weird. His name is Ein, and he is basically the version of Hayate when he has amnesia.
Right.
So,
but they're both oftentimes selectable characters in the same game.
Right, and
they fight each other.
Yeah, Ein, if you see him again, he's going to be a strong striker, 100%. Like he just throws his fist in your face.
Right. So there's Akira from Virtua Fighter.
Yeah. Momiji, this character here is now Tora, which was a guest character from this one here. Now Tora from Samurai Warriors.
Samurai Warriors. Not Tora the second.
Rachel,
they still at some point have yet to add Knuckles the Echidna, but it's soon enough, I think.
Dead or Alive 6 and
Knuckles, that's right.
And these characters here, this is Misaki and Kana, and these are Dead or Alive Venus Vacation only characters, but because Lisa came from Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball, it's not unheard of that maybe we will see these guys.
They'll think up a fighting style for him and put him in the game.
Yeah, I want to know what Kana's going to be, because you can't see it there, it's hard to see, but she's like a demon. She's got like horns and everything.
You can work with that in a fighting game. Well, anyway, we got a couple of minutes left.
We've got a few minutes left, but that is basically where we are. That is Dead or Alive 6.
So as promised, we conveyed no information that would help you get into the top 24. Again, like we said, we only made it past first bracket in this. So, you know, as we said, a filthy casuals guide to Dead or Alive.
So I hope you guys had fun. If you guys have any questions or want to bring anything up, let us know.
Yeah, I do think, you know, again, I would recommend Dead or Alive. It's a very fun game that has very consumer-friendly business practices as far as like how they want to sell you additional content.
Yeah, if you're a mark like me, I wish Tecmo wouldn't mistreat people like me, the marks for the game, who will buy everything.
The suckers who will throw all the money at the costumes, and now Capcom is like, wait a minute, we can get away with that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here, this is a $15 DLC pack for Chun-Li in a wedding dress. It's like,
yeah, let's have a day one DLC that is $91. The season pack, $91 DLC for Dead or Alive 6.
That doesn't include everything either, because they don't understand what a season pass is. You know, and Capcom follows suit. At the very least, for now, Bandai Namco is keeping it reasonable that, you know, when you get your season pass, you get like your fighters and you get your costume sets, and you can, you know, be roughly like, let's say if the horny level of Dead or Alive is like, you know, a 10. You know, Soul
Calibur's a
Calibur is
9.98.
Yeah, 9.5, 9.8, and then certain parts of Tekken, you know, you can get down to like, I would say, you know, a solid 9, and they can maintain, you know, dignity in the FGC.
But yeah, I hope to see more people playing Dead or Alive. I'm glad that it got some you know, notice here, and so I hope to see more people into it. So, any questions, anything? Hey.
So, from watching Dead or Alive 6, I've noticed that some characters have chain throws, throws that go into other throws.
Yes.
Can you break out of those?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so
yeah, you can break out of chain throws.
I am very bad at it, which is how I lost, because the guy was using Mila and was chain throwing me on the ground all the time. But it is possible, yes.
Okay, so you can.
It's a little easier to do than breaking out of a chain throw in Tekken, where it's like, you better know how to play King yourself,
right,
so that you know the input for the thing that he's going to do, because that's the only thing he'll accept.
Right.
But, yeah, so once again, we're the Anime World Order podcast, not really a video game related thing, but my name is Daryl, he's Gerald.
Gerald. This is the only time we get to talk about video games, so we play a lot. So thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm glad to see you know, more people showing up. Oh, we got one in the front.
What's the difference between Kasumi and her clone?
What's the difference between Kasumi and Alpha 152?
Alpha 152 is like insanely good. From the people I know who play her, she has a whole different moveset largely. I think she's got higher combos, but she's a lot more difficult to execute that I've found. Yeah.
Sorry, I do have another question.
That's cool. You got time.
If you, for example, you go for a mid hold and you're pressing back and they kick you, is it back to counter a kick? A mid kick?
It's forward and counter is a kick.
Okay,
so it's a mid kick.
So say that they punch you instead. Does it count as the same type of counter?
No,
you'll
that's
get
the thing.
hit.
So then you will get hit.
So does it do the same 30%, like plus 30%?
It's a counter strike, it's not a counter hold.
It's not a counter strike, so it doesn't do as much damage.
Okay,
otherwise it would be too much of a risk to do any countering.
Okay.
So yeah, but the holds are what do, like the throws, I should say, are what do the
really big
you
damage
do
on someone.
damage
Yeah.
if you grab somebody trying to do a hold.
Right, so that's why it's all about like psyching out the other guy to throw out a counter.
One thing I'll also add, just because I know we're basically out of time, but another thing I think that is good about Dead or Alive is that I think it's more fun as a couch game than it is as online. You know, matchmaking on the PS4 right now, especially between a lot of people who stayed loyal to 5 and people who are kind of gradually adopting 6, you know, you may end up being matched against someone who is several ranks higher than you.
I've noticed that, yeah. It's
and then on
take a long
PC,
time
there's
to
not
get
cross-platform, and so, you know, there's much fewer player base on the PC online. So I recommend, you know, DOA as like a game that you play like locally. That's just my
if you have
opinion.
friends, which none of us
Who
do.
has friends when you have Dead or Alive?
Yes. So thank you all
Thanks
so much
for coming.
for coming to the panel.
And we will see you around, hopefully.